Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Sangoma for this SS7 call center revenue with IMG 2020 webinar. It's good to see so many participants attending today, and we really appreciate your attendance. And we do hope you're going to find it somewhat informative today. So what I'd like to do is just going to go over the agenda. First of all, what I will do is just do a quick introduction to Sangoma. And then I'm going to hand over to David Bridges, who's going to go over details of our IMG solutions, which is basically like talking about the IMG, its use cases. We have a project called Depth Connect for Avaya. And then I'll come back and I'll just discuss, have a slide or two on selling the IMG. Then we will have a brief summary and then a question and answer session, before we break up. And also, everyone, please don't forget to use the webinar toolbar to submit questions, and you will get notified with recordings and a copy of the presentation. So, okay, so why partner with Sangoma? As you can see from this slide, Sangoma has been around for quite some time, over 35 years, and we've seen to acquire recently the unfortunate title of being the best known secret in the industry. But we're actively trying to address that, and this is all due to our comprehensive UC solution portfolio. So as you can see from this slide, we've evolved from our early days of selling network cards for open source PBX solutions. So what we see now is that we range from sponsorship to two of the largest open source communication projects in the world, which is Free PBX and Asterisk, to network connectivity, communication platform as a service, flexible, on-prem and cloud UC solutions, SIP trunking, conferencing through our great Sangoma Meet application, and carrier service solutions. So we have an exceptionally large customer base, which ranges from small to medium businesses all the way to large enterprises and service providers. So why customers choose Sangoma? In the previous slide, it mentioned that we are traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we've seen some phenomenal growth over the past few years. This has been organic and also through about eight acquisitions over the last 10 years or so, which has grown our revenues from about 10 million to close to 150 million, and our staff from around 40 to 340 plus worldwide. So, and also, as I stated in the last slide, we are the curators and main contributors to Asterisk and Free PBX, which I believe are the most widely deployed in the world. And we do spend a lot of resources on these projects in terms of development, along with the open source community. And with that, comes a certain industry accolades. Okay, so and basically, as you can see, we are proven, and we are a growing company despite the current world pandemic, which we're now all facing. So with regards to a single vendor solution, our solutions range from SBC to to secure voice networks to voice over IP gateways for applications including legacy to IP conversion, to a comprehensive range of telephony cards supporting analog and digital applications for both voice and data. And also, we have a comprehensive range of IP and DECT headsets, and desktop and mobile clients, and they're specifically designed for use with our UC systems that allow for pretty much ease of installation and ultimately ease of use. So that's pretty much a snapshot of Sangoma. And what I'd like to now do is hand over to David Bridges. He's our IMG guru, and he's now going to discuss our IMG solutions, and then I'll be coming back after that. So thank you very much. And David, please take over.
Oh, thank you very much, Ed. So the purpose of the webinar is to go over the IMG 2020 and how it can help connect into contact center revenue that you might have available to you in your market space. So I'm going to talk about a little bit at a high level of what the IMG does and how it does connections, and then drill down into a little bit of the details and then go over some of the use cases. I think when you look at a product like a VoIP gateway, it's nice to have a VoIP gateway, but it's more beneficial to understand how to actually use it so that you can sell it. So what are the IMG 2020s? You can see here that you can use it to connect to a variety of different situations, whether it be connecting into a carrier like an MSC that might be used in SS7, business residential services, SIP trunking, contact centers like we're going to speak about, even into the mobile networks. We have the ability to handle a lot of different codecs that are used in the mobile networks, including some of the newer codecs that are going to be coming out. You could use it in wholesale or peering environments. So there's a lot of different things that you can use the IMG 2024, and we're going to touch on a lot of those different use cases throughout this. From a base perspective, the IMG can be scalable from 4 to 32 E1s for IMG 1010. We're not going to speak too much about that particular product, but we're it's basically a earlier generation of the IMG 2020. Could support 4 to 24 E1s in a single 1U platform, or 24 E1s to 63 E1s, which is effectively an STM1 in the same 1U platform. So we offer basically two different IO connectivity options. So you'll see that when you see certain things in the slides regarding 24 E1s versus 63 E1s, understand that that's the same box with the same software, but just a different IO so that you can connect to the networks differently. Some real basic information. This is a bit of an eye chart. It's a speeds and feeds kind of slide. It's more for your use later on if you have a question. It's like, oh, how much can it handle, or those types of things. It's an any-to-any gateway is the way we try to pitch it, right? So it can handle SS7, and that could be TDM or M3UA. It can handle SIP, it can handle SIP-I, it can handle H.323, handles ISDN. So it handles all those protocols and can connect any of those protocols to any other protocol at any given time. Scalability, it's, like I had mentioned, it goes from 4 to 24 E1s in a single 1U chassis, or from the 21 E1 to 63 E1s if you use the STM1 connection. A very high call rate so that you can handle certain applications like dialer applications where connection times are not very long sometimes if you're just doing establishment. And actually also has things like integrated transcoding, so there's no off-board transcoding that you're required to use, and handle a wide variety of different codecs. Has a lot of connectivity on the IP side, so that you could segregate your management networks from your SIP networks, from your RTP and data networks. Baked in security, has effectively a lot of SBC-like functions because it will typically connect to a carrier on the SIP side. You'll need those security kind of functionalities so that you can maintain your integrity on the IP side. Redundancy, we have dual power supplies. They're hot swappable, whether they be AC or DC. It's just an orderable part as to how you want to do it. So let's dive into some of the use cases on the IMG. What do we see on how you use this product? We see a lot of different customers using the IMG 2020 for access and peering SBC on the IP side. So you have large enterprises. It doesn't really fit a very small enterprise just because it requires, a minimum density of 41s, which is a lot of channels for a small enterprise. But it also will handle SIP trunking when you want to provide those larger enterprise a connectivity. A lot of times what we're seeing, and we'll talk about it, is cost preservation. So folks will have network gear that they already have in place, and they don't want to upgrade it. They don't want to toss it out, but they want to move and transition from a TDM connection to a SIP connection, and they'll use the IMG as that SIP connection. And we also see it a lot with those folks that have SIP cores and need to connect to legacy SS7 networks. And that's common throughout a lot of different parts of the world. There are, of course, carriers throughout the world that are moving to SIP, and so you get your connection from the carrier using SIP. But there's a lot of carriers that exist out there that use the traditional old legacy TDM equipment. And if you want to connect to them via SIP, you have to put something in between yourselves to give them SS7. So let's look at the contact center use case. What we see is that service providers want to leverage the new contact center offerings that are out there, right? So whether it is a remote contact center that is not necessarily within their geographic region, that provides lower costs and handles their 1-800 traffic or their toll-free traffic, and needs to have a help desk or help center, the IMG allows those service providers that don't have SIP connectivity to connect to these new contact centers. So we see lots of different contact center providers that are actually buying the equipment that allows them to connect to the carriers in the manners that the carriers want to be connected to. It allows them to scale. So even if you do buy, say, a 4E1 IMG 2020, you can license it without actually having to add anything hardware-wise to the product so that it can grow within up to the 24E1. So it allows you to start small and then increase your traffic as you add more customers to your portfolio. So we see the contact center providers buying these products so that they can offer different connectivity options to service providers. We also see the service providers buying this product so that they can actually leverage different contact center providers and connect to those contact center providers using SIP, which is typically what they only offer as a connection option. SIP trunking is a pretty standard play for the gateway. Conceptually, it's the same concept. You'll have a service provider that has connections, whether it be PRI to a large enterprise, and the enterprise may be either TDM or SIP, and the IMG allows that connection so that whether it is providing SIP to the enterprise, where the enterprise has just SIP inbound and the provider is using TDM, we do find that there's certain customers that have very good rates with their current TDM provider, and they don't want to lose that, but they want to use some of the new abilities in the SIP space with a lot of, for instance, a lot of different products that we offer in the unified communication space, but those don't have TDM connectivity. So they'll use the gateway to provide that connectivity to utilize their current low-cost TDM connections and then do the SIP on the inside. The other way around works the same way, right? So if the enterprise has just legacy TDM equipment but wants to leverage low-cost carriers using SIP, they'll use the gateway to access those lower costs. So a lot of things as to why you use the gateway are really revenue-based, right? So it's either you need connectivity to preserve investment, right? So you might have a TDM connection that's going away and you need to move to a SIP carrier. So you have to figure out how you're going to do that. And you have legacy VAS, value-added services. For instance, you might have dialer application, outbound notification, emergency notification, IVRs, voicemail. They all might be on legacy equipment, right? But you now have a carrier that's only going to provide you SIP. Well, how do you access your new carrier with your traditional old equipment? That's when you use a gateway. Likewise, you might have new products on your inside core in the enterprise space, and you're trying to figure out how can I leverage my existing TDM connections that are low cost for me and still use these new applications. The gateway again works in that space. So you're really using this product to branch out and give yourself different connectivity options so that you can lower costs or add new services. And that's really what the gateway allows you to do. It's the flexibility in the service provider space to connect to different call centers or call centers to connect to different carriers, right? So it's the same concept. In the service provider space, again, a lot of different use cases that we see is the same concept. The service providers have the same problems that the enterprise folks have. They have a large mix of products. They don't want to get rid of them. They work, they're used to them, and they need to be able to offer different connectivity options for that traditional platforms that they have and connect into the new SIP space, right? And so they'll use the gateway to connect their platforms into different connection options, right? And that could be with another carrier, it could be to a contact center, it could be to a new dialer customer that they might pick up. Large enterprises, you know, they'll not want to necessarily deliver TDM trunks to the actual enterprises, so they'll use the gateway to actually deliver that SIP offering to their customers. So there's a lot of different use cases from a kind of connection option, and that's really why we really talk about the concept of any to any, right? So all you have to do is figure out what is it that you have in your network and what is it that you want to connect to or leverage, and how do we make that happen using the IMG 2020. So here's some examples that we saw. We had a SIP customer that was using the SIP dialer application. The SIP dialer application had no TDM connectivity. The customer had TDM trunks coming in. They wanted to leverage this new SIP dialer application. They put a gateway in, and all of a sudden they're able to continue to use their TDM provider as well as their new SIP application. We have customers that are moving from traditional fax lines that are actual individual POTS lines out to the customer at $30 to $40, dollars per month per line. They want to move to a document management system that leverages that they could service their entire enterprise with. So they'll use the gateway to handle the new SIP fax service that they have and still connect to their TDM carriers. Legacy PBX locations, high TDM costs. They need to move to a SIP carrier, right? So this is the other direction. Now they have a SIP carrier and they need to leverage their existing application. They don't want to get rid of their equipment that they have. They've invested so much money. They don't have the time, the effort, the manpower, the dollars, the euros to rip that all out and put in something new. Put in a simple gateway, make that connection, and off you go to get rid of your high TDM costs and move to a SIP carrier. We see folks in the modem space where the carriers traditionally would have provided them ISDN lines. The modem space is traditionally a ISDN connection to modem banks. Well, those are no longer being offered by the carriers, those TDM connections. So they use a gateway and they leverage all their existing modem banks and connect to the carriers using SIP now. So they have the ability to keep their infrastructure and not have to worry about all of their things that are working. And that's the key thing. You have things that work, you want to connect to something new, that's when you use a gateway. One of the things that we worked on throughout this was making sure that we were Avaya Dev Connect so that we could play in the Avaya space. Obviously, Avaya has a wide worldwide footprint. So we wanted to make sure that we were certified. So we've gone through the Dev Connect process, whether it be Avaya and the Experience Portal, Avaya 7 as well, and Avaya 8. So those new versions of Aura have come out. We've made sure that we're certified. And again, the connection is, you'll have a session manager on one side that's using SIP, and then you're providing the gateway so that it can provide that connection out to the TDM world, right? So we actually see that as another use case that the IMG, but more Avaya centric for those folks that are on an Avaya platform, but then need to have some connectivity to the TDM world. So again, we have a whole portfolio of products, right? And our whole goal is to provide something that you need, we have in the telecommunication space. As Ed had mentioned, right? Starting from headsets to phones to SBCs to different gateways, UCAS, soft clients, desktop solutions. Those are the things that we do, right? Whether it be prem-based, whether it be cloud-based, we use our portfolio of products to provide a full suite of solutions to customers, right? So when customers come to us and they'll have different needs, we'll typically start a discussion in one segment and then branch out and say, hey, we also have things that can help you in this other area, right? So we have different products across the range of communication needs that service providers and enterprises need. Connecting to other networks, I've sort of mentioned, like, if you're already a service provider and you need to provide peering type functionality, our products scale not only from the enterprise level, but up to a service provider level. Now, we're not probably going to be best suited for an area that might need 100 STM1s, but certainly for low numbers of terminations in the carrier world, like, say, for instance, if you're talking about 4 STM1s and you need to connect one carrier to another, certainly the IMG 2020 fits well in that space. Certainly it fits well in SBCs for peering access to certain levels, right? And so our products are very reasonable for those connections where you don't want to buy a very, very large system to make that connection. You can use these gateways and our SBCs to provide those lower number of termination connections. So I'm going to toss it back to Ed. He's going to talk about a little bit about, like, how do I do this, right? So how do I get these IMGs? How do I get them into my customer's hands? So Ed's going to take over and we'll walk through some of that.
Thanks, Dave. That was really, really good. And I hope everybody found that, like I said, informative. So yeah, so selling IMGs. So first of all, let's look at some of our IMG customers, and we do have some many big players. Okay, like David just mentioned, we have Avaya, and we have a very large U.S. government agency, which probably you can guess by the title of that one bullet point. But we also work with KDDI, okay, in Japan, which is the third largest carrier, and working with Ericsson on IPv6 to 4 conversion, for voicemail, for all of the subscribers. Also via Unisys, we have British Telecom, which is obviously the largest UK carrier, and it's basically using SS7 to SIP conversion. So it's a conversion of a specialized type of BT SS7 messaging. Telefonica, basically for their interconnect network. Also Symbio Networks with the TNZI, a large Southeast Asia wholesale carrier. So basically, connectivity via SS7 through regional operators. Simwood, they are a very large UK wholesale SIP trunk provider, and they connect to BT presently via SS7 using our IMG gateways. And then Frontier and In Digital, basically also connecting via SS7 to mobile operators for next generation 911 services. So this is an example of some of the very large customers and players that are using the IMG products. So best fits, as David said, he kind of made it clear, where does IMG 2020 fit best? It's for, like, basically SS7 voice networks, ISUP connectivity to SIP, okay? Networks, from 81s to 4 STM1s, as David says, we're really not in it where you're talking, like, high density STM1s, that's not our market. Also for transcoding applications, okay, transcoding, for example, VoIP codecs, such as AMR wideband and narrowband, 2 other codecs, and we're soon to allow like full band codecs, like EVS with our next generation IMG 2030. It may also be supported in 2020. We'll have to, that needs to be confirmed. And also, as we said, high density ISDN connectivity. The IMG 2020 itself physically supports 24 E1s, but you can start off with just 4, and through software upgrades, enable those ports going forward. So that's basically TDM to SIP. So how to buy? Okay, so we have an extensive partner network throughout Europe, okay, and it is trained and supported by us. We have, as you can say, David's based in North America, but we have experts and experts in Europe, okay, and pre-sales, sales, engineers, that are able to support our partner network throughout this region. And we can deploy expertise quickly, pretty much in any region. So, if you want to get more information, there's my email address. You got my number. Yeah, so we look forward to hearing from you guys. A lot of times the application lists are project-based, but if there's any that you see, please, we'll be happy to come and engage with yourselves. So in summary, as I mentioned earlier, Sangoma is a growing, stable company, okay, and we are still investing in gateway technology. What we didn't mention was that we've inherited the IMG through our acquisition of the CCD, the Converged Communication Division of Dialogic, early in 2018. But we saw it as a very, very strategic acquisition, and we're still doing a lot of investment in that product. And the IMG 2020 is pretty much what we call a de facto gateway standard, in the industry. Hence the really good customer base that we have. And pricing can be very competitive. Please talk to us. Sometimes there were some people say that it's a very expensive solution moving forward. Come talk to us. We can try to be very competitive in the marketplace to help you win business with this product. And there is still potential in this market, so please talk to us. Its best fit is in the SS7 market or higher density ISDN. Okay, and as we mentioned, it is used by telcos and major customers all over the world. So, with that, I want to thank you guys. Thanks for that. I believe there are some questions. I think they're coming through. And some of these, let me just have a look at them. I think David, I'm gonna have to ask you for some of these, ask you these questions. It looks like you're the right person to address them.
Sure.
A bit of on the technical side. It says, the first question is, how many different point codes can an IMG 2020 be connected to or connect to?
Actually, quite a few. So if you're doing SS7 and you need to connect to different point codes, so you want to provide different connections to different operators, you could connect up to 256 different point codes. So typically an operator might have a point code, and then another operator might have another point code, and you'll be able to connect up to 256. If you can connect up to 256 different operators, good on you, good for you. We don't typically see that, but we have the capabilities to do it.
And there's another question I think is related to this, is how many point codes can be assigned to an IMG?
Yeah.
Is that the same question, or is it a bit different?
Yeah, it is slightly different. So like in one way you're talking about how many can you connect to, and then another question, which is this one, is how many can you operate as? So the actual IMG can actually operate as 4 different point codes. So let's say you have carrier A that you want to connect to using one point code, you can connect to carrier B using a completely different point code. A lot of times we'll also see that needed when you're behind some mainline frontline switches and you want to be like an internal point code. Having the flexibility to advertise yourself as 4 different point codes is pretty useful.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. I think there's really just one more question here. I did not see any mention of various TCAP protocols like INAP, CAMEL, or MAP. Does the IMG 2020 handle any of these protocols?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. And the answer is no. So the box is really created to handle voice connectivity, right? So if you look at INAP, CAMEL, MAP, those are all application parts that are providing information between nodes within the SS7 network to do specialized services. Those will exist within the network, but the actual IMG is really just handling that voice that comes in on a TDM circuit and needs to be converted to SIP. It's not handling the signaling only messages that are associated with MAP, CAMEL, or INAP. So we don't have any baked in TCAP functionality into the product, except in very limited cases when you're doing message waiting indicator, but that's about it. So your normal roaming type applications, help welcome roamers, prepaid applications that might be running over CAMEL, those are things that would not necessarily traverse through the IMG. They're signaling only.
Okay, great, good stuff. Okay, well that's basically it for the questions. David, thank you very much for your time. I realize it's a bit early for you. Not overly early for you, being on the East Coast of the US. I'm basically based in the UK, so I'm fine. I want to thank everybody for attending. I hope you've found this insightful. Please also note that you will be getting notified of on the recording of this, and also you'll be getting a copy of the presentation. So yeah, so please share that with your colleagues, and if there are any opportunities, projects that you see working on, like I said, please get in contact with us. We'll be happy to work with you, and we think that we have a very good cost-effective solution that we can provide to your customers. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and I would like to just wish everybody an enjoyable rest of their day. So thank you very much, and goodbye.